The question for today, our focus for today, and I always start with these questions, is how long should I study? As a student, you want to be able to understand information in the shortest period of time. And I know a big challenge is you cram. You don't sometimes, are you guilty of this? You don't study for like days or maybe even weeks, and then the night before you cram all that information in your head. And then what do you do the next morning? You're like at breakfast and nobody could talk to you because you don't want information to come out by accident, and you can't wait to take the test. And once you take the test, what happens after that? The information it's gone, right? And so I'm gonna share with you a technique on how to retain that information better, because sometimes it's okay to cram if you need to forget the information after that. But if this is your field of study, this is your major, or you're going into this career, you wanna retain that information. So there's a difference between cramming to forget and studying to remember. And part of it is when and how long you study. So I wanna talk about that in this session. Now, in previous sessions, as a quick review, remember this because spaced repetition is very important also along the way. We talked about FAST. We talked about the FAST method for learning anything. First, you forget what you already know about it, situational things, your limiting thoughts and beliefs. A is active, which you're being active right now, you're participating. The S is state, so I wanna remind you to sit or stand in the way, that you're paying attention, that you're completely focused and enthused and joyful about this process. Now you shouldn't even have to move because you should feel that way already. That's the S is state. And finally, the T is remember to learn to teach this to someone else. Learn to apply and learn to teach, because when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. So who are you gonna share this lesson with when we're done? And then from there, we went into your GPA. What's your goal? What's your purpose? What's your action? And then yesterday, we talked about the best way of taking notes. One of the best ways of taking notes is capture, create. Drawing a line down the page, which I hope you're doing right now. Capture what you're about to learn on the left side, and then ask those 3 power questions on the right side. How do you take knowledge and turn it into power? Which was my shirt that I was wearing yesterday. I wear these shirts very deliberately because I carry my notes on me at all times. And I know a lot of you have purchased our shirts and you're wearing it because you wear your inspiration and your instruction with you. So let's get into this. What do you do? What's the optimal amount of time to be able to learn something? And here's your answer. It's 25 minutes. Clear-cut answer, 25 minutes. The reason why we do all of these sessions in a very short amount of time is because after about 25 minutes, there's a decline of your focus. And where your focus goes, your energy flows. And so if you're losing that focus, you're losing your comprehension, you're losing your retention, and just the general energy around that information. So you notice television programming, a lot of shows are about 20, 25, 30 minutes, and that's what you're doing to program your mind. But what are you doing to conquer your mind? You're studying. Because when you're studying is to the mind what exercise is for your body. It's real good exercise, mental fitness. But you want to study for about 25 minutes. They call this the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro technique. Basically, Pomodoro means tomato, and they used to have a tomato timer here. Like think about the kitchen timers. Where you're cooking, you put it for 25 minutes and you study for 25 minutes, and afterwards then you take what I call a brain break. And here's the science behind it. Primacy and recency. What do they mean? Primacy means you tend to remember things in the beginning. Primacy means you tend to remember, prime meaning first, in the beginning of something. Meaning if you go to a party and you meet 30 strangers, you're probably gonna remember the first people you met at that party. If I give you a list of words, and in this program, I'm gonna challenge you to memorize anything from the periodic table to important statistics to any information that you need to for your classes, you're probably gonna remember the things in the beginning. So if I give you a list of 30 things, you're probably gonna remember the first ones. That's primacy. Recency says you tend to remember things more recent. So if you go to that same party, meet 20 or 30 strangers, you're probably gonna remember the people in the beginning, primacy, but you're also probably gonna remember the people you met at the end or towards the end, more recent. recency. Or if I give you a list of 30 things you need to remember, you're probably going to remember the first words, primacy, and you're probably going to remember the words you heard at the end, which means what? Recency. Now, what does that mean when it comes to your studying? If you cram, which I'm suggesting you do not do, if you cram for 8 hours straight and you pull an all-nighter, which means you don't get to sleep, and sleep is so critical, but if you cram 8 hours or 5 hours and you don't take a break, that means you remember stuff in the beginning and stuff at the end, but in between there's a big dip. Does that make sense? Primacy says you remember things in the beginning, high retention and understanding, and things at the end, but in the middle you'll have that dip. Now, what if you took a break every 25 minutes using the Pomodoro technique? You study for 25 minutes, all of a sudden you create more primacies and recencies. So instead of having the big dip in the middle, you create breaks every 30 minutes, you create more beginnings and more ends. If you have 5 more primacies in the same amount of time, or 8 more primacies in that same amount of time, and 8 more recencies in the same amount of time, you create more beginnings and ends, which means you retain all that extra information. One of the habits of highly effective people in Dr. Stephen Covey's that I've referenced before is sharpen the saw. The 7th habit is sharpen the saw, because if you metaphorically have all this wood you need to cut, and you have a saw, but it has a dull blade, when do you want to sharpen that saw? And metaphorically, we do have a lot of wood to cut, right? You have a lot of books, textbooks, things you need to read and process, notes to study. You have a lot of wood to cut, but if you have a dull blade, better you sharpen that saw first than at the end. Because if you wait, you're gonna struggle and suffer and waste a lot of time in the beginning when you do that needlessly. And the goal is not to do that. Let other people do that or help them out when they're doing that. One of the ways of working smart is to work in these 25-minute chunks, because this is how your nervous system, this is how your neurology, this is what neuroscience is saying is the optimal time to study, because after that your focus dips. And you know that, and that's why we keep these sessions in digestible, bite-sized bits, because a little by a little becomes a lot. So what's the takeaway here? What's your homework, if you will? Your homework assignment is to get a timer or use your phone. I like an external timer that I could just do it analog, that you could buy online for like $3 or $5, put it for 25 minutes, and when it goes off, then you take your brain break, and then you come back, do another 25 minutes. When you go beyond that, it's counterproductive. It doesn't help you to get more done. It actually takes away from not only your focus, but also your recall of the information you're about to learn. We keep it digestible on purpose, because a little becomes a lot. So what do? I want you to start chunking into 25-minute intervals, your personal studies. Not in class, because you can't control that. If a class is an hour or 90 minutes, you can't control that. But what I want you to do on your own personal study, which a lot of time is spent in your own personal study, is just to study in 25-minute increments. They actually have a Pomodoro app on your phone, or simply use your countdown timer. Put it for 25 minutes. When it goes off, give yourself a little bit of a brain break to reset, come back. You create more primacy, more recency, and that's how you're gonna succeed. All right, that's your homework assignment. Study in 25-minute intervals. And what I want you to share right now in our community, because remember, the part of the community, the reason why it's so valuable is learning is not solo, it's social. Together, everyone can achieve more. That's what TEAM stands for, right? Together, everyone achieves more. And it's kind of cliche and it's kind of cheesy, but it's true. It's not just your neurological networks, it's your social networks. And we learn more by sharing with other people. So in the community, I want you to share your thoughts on the Pomodoro technique. And I want you to make a public declaration that you're gonna study as best you can in 25-minute intervals. Say yes, say I'm going to do the Pomodoro technique, and put that out publicly, and you're more likely to follow through.